Welcome back to Girl of Recaps. Today I am going to explain a sci-fi thriller movie from 2018 titled Replicas. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. A helicopter carrying a valuable load flies onto the island of Arecibo, Puerto Rico. William is waiting in his office for the shipment to arrive. The helicopter lands on the grounds of Biologist Industries, and immediately the entire facility is being notified of its arrival. William joins Scott and Margaret as they walk toward the experimental lab. He asks them if the donor has signed the required documents. Ed hears the announcement, grabs his belongings, and heads there as well. The donor is being placed and unpacked in the lab, next to a robot body. William and Ed discuss the details of the donor's demise, then proceed with the experiment. Ed examines the donor's cortex activity and confirms him to be viable. William agrees with the findings and informs everyone that his biological brain will be replicated within a synthetic brain. He instructs Ed to commence the process. The neural probe designed to carry out the task is activated, and the procedure of transferring the soldier's brain begins. William starts the neural imprint and works on the application of the human mind onto the synthetic one. He engages all of the functions of the mind and directs Margaret to energize the body. The replica awakens, and William addresses it by name as it begins to move. It inquires who he is, and William clarifies that he has transitioned into a synthetic brain. While coming online, it begins to panic and tear itself apart, dismantling piece by piece until William shuts the subject down. William discusses with Jones about the progress they've just made. Jones isn't impressed that the subject spoke for the first time and tells him that they need more significant results to retain the shareholders of the company. William tells him that his family has made too many sacrifices for his life's work. He assures Jones that he is very close to a breakthrough. Later, William drives home and finds his wife Mona in front of the house loading the car for a trip. He hurries inside and sees that his children Matt, Zoe, and Sophie aren't packed yet either. Ed enters their home, and Sophie hands him her pet fish, instructing him not to overfeed it. He asks William if he has spoken to Jones, and if he's been terminated yet. Mona overhears their conversation as Ed explains that the subject disintegrated. However, William interrupts him and tells her that it spoke. She remarks that if it could speak, then it could also experience emotions, and that he shouldn't resurrect people until he resolves all the issues. Since Mona is a doctor, she disapproves of the potential suffering involved in his experiments. They load the car, and he tells her that he's on the brink of a breakthrough, but something is hindering the synthetic from attaining consciousness. Mona suggests that they might be missing a soul. William disagrees, asserting that it's all neurochemistry. She dislikes his response and tells him that perhaps he's losing sight of what is right and wrong. Ed bids them farewell. Later, they are driving in the rain and almost collide with a truck. It's a narrow escape, but they're unharmed. Suddenly, a tree strikes the car and kills Mona. Then William drives off a cliff and into the water. He regains consciousness and checks if anyone is alive. No one, except him, has survived the accident. William does not call for an ambulance. Instead, he contacts Ed. He brings their equipment and follows William to the bodies. William asks for his assistance, but Ed believes they should notify the police. Eventually, Ed changes his mind and assists William in transferring the minds of his family into the equipment. They arrive at the facility, and Ed tells him that there's a reason he hasn't made human clones yet. They never turn out as expected. He asks William if he's prepared to terminate the process if something goes awry. William does not give a direct answer. He simply wants to proceed. Ed shows him the pods in which he could replicate the bodies, but he's concerned that William still hasn't perfected the process of transferring the mind. They reach the bodies, and William begs Ed not to disclose what has happened to anyone. Furthermore, he asks him to dispose of the bodies. He agrees and tells William that he'll meet him back at the house. When Ed arrives there, he opens the truck and William sees that there are only 3 pods for creating the bodies. Unable to decide which family member to resurrect, he writes their names on a piece of paper and asks Ed to draw one. Ed refuses to do that as well, so William has to make the choice himself. The name drawn from the bowl is Zoe. Later, Ed explains how to care for the pods and maintain the chemical balance inside, emphasizing that the most crucial aspect is to keep the energy in the pods. They must never lose power. However, William does not have a backup generator, so he collects a number of car batteries and connects them to the pods. Ed informs him that the clones will require 17 days to emerge, and he has until then to give them consciousness. He asks what will happen to Zoe. William responds that he'll erase her memory from their drives, and they'll never remember her. Later, he is seen deleting Zoe's memory from the minds of the others. However, the hard drive containing her consciousness remains active. A few days later, Ed is at work and encounters Jones, who inquires about William's absence. Ed fabricates a reason for his absence, and then Jones instructs him to let William know that if they don't see progress with the synthetic soon, the project will be shut down. Ed calls William to relay the message, stating that if they are shut down, the company will seek the expensive equipment now in his possession. William tells him he needs to come to the house and monitor the pods so he can go to work. Once he arrives at work, Jones visits him and doesn't seem overly concerned about his possible illness. On his desk, he spots Zoe's drawing, and when he returns home, he brings it with him. As he approaches his front door, he encounters Matt's teacher, who has come to check on him since he hasn't been at school for 5 days. Ed handles the situation by informing her that the boy has chickenpox. Then he asks William why he hasn't contacted the kid's school and Mona's workplace to inform them of the situation, as if he expected no one to notice his entire family's disappearance. parents. Later, he retrieves all their laptops and phones. He uses them to email the kids' school and also to text with his children's friends, making it appear as though they are still alive. Meanwhile, Margaret is supervising the repairs on the robotic body. William is working from home, attempting to find a method to transfer the mind from one body to another. He runs an unsuccessful simulation and starts to lose hope. The clones are nearly ready. Ed continues to cover for him at work, and he keeps running one simulation after another. 17 days after the accident, Ed arrives at William's house to remove the clones from the pods. William tells him that he's not ready yet because he doesn't understand why the last experiment failed. Ed explains that every moment they remain in the pods, they continue to age, so waiting for him to figure it out is not feasible. William decides to sedate them to keep their minds in a dormant state. Ed informs him that he can only keep them sedated for 72 hours and no longer. They begin draining his wife's pod, and she starts breathing on her own. William sedates her immediately. Ed is thrilled that their experiment has succeeded. Later, they set up IVs for the clones, and Ed departs, saying he'll return the next day to check on them. William continues to review the footage from the previous experiment and remains puzzled about why it failed. That night, he is prepared to terminate his wife's clone when he receives a call from Jones. While talking to him, he notices that each time he touches Mona's clone, her heartbeat increases. When Ed arrives at the house, William tells him that he has figured out the issue. He leads Ed up to Mona and reveals his discovery. William explains that the reason the brain transfer doesn't work is that it is not in its original body. When placed in a synthetic brain, the mind becomes disoriented when it cannot locate its own flesh. The solution to the problem of transferring the mind into a synthetic body is to deceive it into believing it is still in its own body. And it should be even easier with his family, because the bodies are their clones. They prepare to start transferring Mona's mind into the clone's body. William manages the uploading process, then begins the imprint. When it's complete, Ed panics as nothing seems to be happening, until she suddenly starts convulsing. She wakes up and recognizes him, so he puts her back to sleep until he can do the same with the kids and get the house ready for them. At the end of the day, once everything is done, Ed leaves and says they'll see each other at work. William returns to the house and starts cleaning up and removing any traces of what happened. Lastly, he needs to dispose of all of Zoe's belongings and make it seem like she never existed. He packs all of her possessions and throws them away. Later that evening, he lies down in bed next to his spouse. William wakes up the next morning and finds Mona missing. When he rushes downstairs, he sees them all having breakfast as if nothing has ever happened. Mona says that she feels great and goes out for a run. The children ask for pancakes, and he makes some for them. Mona is jogging when she suddenly feels a pain in her abdomen. When she returns, Sophie pours milk into a cup, and they notice that it's curdled. Mona says that she just got it recently. William gets a call from Ed, informing him that they have an incoming donor at work and that if he doesn't want their secret revealed, he should be there. He informs the clone family that he needs to leave for work, and they don't notice anything unusual about that, but Mona does find his behavior odd. William arrives at work. He and Ed are preparing the donor for the transfer, but he deems him unsuitable because he doesn't want to put another one through the rejection phase and the potential suffering it might cause. Jones is breathing down their necks, and Ed is frustrated that they didn't complete it. William comes up with the idea to transfer his own mind into the synthetic brain, so he takes the transfer equipment to the restroom and carries out the transference protocol on himself. Meanwhile, Sophie and Mona search for their cell phones, but can't locate them anywhere. Mona feels unsettled. Back at the facility, William finds Ed and informs him of what he did. He explains that he will develop an algorithm which will assist in connecting his imprint to the artificial body, effectively deceiving the synthetic brain into believing the body is his. The added advantage of him being inside that body will be that he will be able to establish himself as the standard for the transferred consciousness. William returns home that evening and finds Mona distressed, immediately telling him that she feels like something is wrong with her. She can't recall much of what happened over the past few weeks. He reassures her and advises that she should rest. He heads to the basement and writes the algorithm. The drive containing his consciousness is placed next to Zoe's. Later, Sophie has a nightmare about her mother passing away and calls for her, but William enters her room and tells her that she merely had a frightening dream. He takes her back to the basement and alters her memory so that it omits the recollection of them dying. Mona catches him there and asks what he's done to Sophie. She demands to know the truth. William reveals that he brought them back to life. They have a discussion later on, and she inquires how he could achieve that. He explains that he couldn't bear losing them and felt he had to do it. She comprehends. The following day, the family meets with Ed at the market. Mona thinks she sees something and almost recalls Zoe. They have dinner together that evening, and William asks them if they should relocate back home. Sophie inquires who Zoe is, mentioning that the name is scrawled in her closet with a crayon. The three of them begin to remember fragments about her, and Mona confronts William about it. He tries to deceive her, but she sees right through him. Suddenly, the doorbell rings. William opens the door for Jones, who greets Mona and requests a brief conversation with him. He informs him that he knows everything about what he has done, and labels his family as subjects of the trial in possession of the company. Jones isn't prepared to have them going about as if everything is normal, fearing the repercussions if someone discovers them. William attempts to negotiate with him by claiming that he knows how to make the synthetic brain function. Unfortunately, Jones isn't interested in that. He reveals that the company isn't even a biomedical firm, but is actually part of the weapons industry. Jones has an alternative plan for his discoveries. He instructs him to hand over the algorithm and then say farewell to his family. William goes to retrieve the algorithm, and Jones messages two hitmen to prepare. When he returns, he tries to poison Jones, but ends up merely rendering him unconscious. He destroys the algorithm algorithm and explains everything about Zoe to Mona and about the company he works for. William tells her that they need to escape. They get into the car and flee before the assassins realize what is happening. Jones wakes up and sees the destroyed algorithm, understanding that it's irreparable. One of his men enters and shows him the tracker they have on the family. He instructs him not to shoot them in the head. Meanwhile, a car begins pursuing the family, crashing into them. They quickly manage to evade capture. William tells Mona that the trackers are embedded in them, attached to the central nervous system, and that they can't be removed. Mona comes up with another plan and tells him to drive to the clinic where she works. When they arrive, Mona gets them into a room and tells Sophie to lie on the bed as she prepares a defibrillator. She explains that she can disable the trackers this way. Meanwhile, the assassins arrive at the hospital and notice that one tracker goes offline. Mona places the defibrillator on Matt's chest next and administers a shock. The assassins kill the security guard, while William is preparing to shock Mona. Her tracker vanishes, and the assassins are unable to locate them. The family escapes from the hospital. Jones contacts someone. William has driven them to the marina and goes to see if he can access Ed's boat. While he searches for the keys, the assassins arrive at the marina and capture the kids and Mona. He witnesses them being taken away, but fails to reach them in time. Ed is at the office, and Jones returns his boat keys as Mona and the children are being taken inside. He tells Mona that William just needs to comply and that everything will be fine. She responds that they will just kill them. Meanwhile, William arrives at the facility. Ed explains how everything with Jones unfolded, revealing that he was involved from the very start. William walks in, and Ed apologizes to him. Then he attempts to negotiate with Jones, who eliminates Ed to make his threats more convincing. William recreates the algorithm for Jones and initiates the imprinting process within the synthetic brain. He powers up the body discreetly. It starts to move and breaks free from its restraints. William returns to Jones and hands him the algorithm. Just as Jones is about to kill Mona, the robot enters, stating that he's there to protect his family. The assassins fire at him, but he slices through them effortlessly. The family gets in the car and prepares to leave, but William can't just abandon the robot. Mona urges him to go. He halts the robot from killing Jones at the last moment. The two of them talk, and the robot says that the body feels like it's his own. Jones informs him that even if they kill him, the company will still pursue them. William and the robot propose a deal to Jones that he cannot refuse. The robot tells him that he should go with the family and that it will stay behind to handle Jones. It creates an imprint from Jones's mind. 17 days later, a clone is prepared to emerge from its pod. The family is on vacation at a beach, and William brings Zoe to them. Mona embraces her warmly. Some time later, Jones is in Dubai, selling William's invention to a wealthy elderly man. The robot is the one carrying out the tasks for Jones.